Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. I'm so excited to talk to Jonathan about the anxious generation. Hopefully some of you have read the book by now, and if not, you'll get a really great gleaning of what it is about. Jonathan, to say your book has hit a nerve would be an understatement. Everyone that I've mentioned that I'm doing this talk with, you two, has replied, "Oh my God, he terrifies me." And they mean your work, I hasten to add, rather than your person. How does it feel to be the bird of ill omen?
Well, first, thanks so much for having me here. Thanks, Pandora, for talking with me here. We Americans, we really have such affection for Britain and for your history and traditions. I'm here for a week with my son. For his high school graduation, I took him to Wimbledon. That's what he wanted. And we went to Bath and saw the Magna Carta. It's, amazing. We love being here. We just hate your weather. It's the middle of July. What the hell are you doing? Okay, with that out of the way. As a social scientist, you try to study complex problems, and then you write policy papers, and then governments ignore them. That's what it is to be a social scientist. And this is entirely different from anything that's ever happened in my life. And the reason, I think, is because childhood changed between 2010 and 2015. It's what I talk about in the book. That's what we're going to talk about. And since 2015, all over the developed world, family life has become a constant fight over screen time. We're all sick of it. Everyone is sick of it. And people didn't know, it wasn't entirely clear that this was the cause of mental illness. There was ambiguity, and we were beginning to figure out, and then COVID hit, and then everybody's on screens all the time. So it's been just incredibly thrilling as a social scientist who was used to knowing what to do to solve problems but having no influence, to actually being able to say, I'm not the bringer of doom and bad news. I'm the bringer of the message that we're going to fix this within 2 or 3 years. Change is happening so fast because everyone is fed up. And because young people, raise your hand if you were born after, let's say, 1993. Raise your hand high if you were born after 1993. Okay, so young people, okay, you hear what we talked about, and I'm going to ask you at the end, did I mischaracterize your generation, or is this what's going on? What I find is that Gen Z, which is 1996 and I just included some others, but that Gen Z actually agrees that this is a problem, and they are looking for a way out. So we'll see if you agree with that.
The book has 4 founding principles. No smartphones before 16, no social media before 16, phone-free schools, and a return to more play-based childhood and early adolescence. Could you talk a little bit more about how you developed those 4 prongs and how they came to make up the anxious generation?
Sure. So those are the 4 foundational reforms. And I didn't know that that's what the book would end up with until I was most of the way through the book. So the key idea, the central idea in the book that you have to grasp is called a collective action problem. And it's a very common term in the social sciences and economics. If you have a pond that's being overfished, and you say, hey, everyone, don't fish so much, just take 1 fish. Well, anybody who follows that is a sucker if nobody else is. But if you all work together, then you can solve the problem, and you don't depopulate the pond, and everybody can have fish forever. Very common situation in societies. We're stuck in this situation because the tech companies are very good at engineering the need to use their product instead of someone else's product. And so any parent who says, no, sweetheart, you're not getting Instagram at 11, she says, Mom, I'm the only one. I'm completely cut off. You don't know what it's like for me. And then we give in because we don't want to see our kids suffer. But the only reason they're on is because everyone else is on. So once you understand that it's a collective action problem, that's how we got into this. That's why everyone feels as an individual that they're powerless. Because as an individual, it would take a hell of a lot of force and resolve and willingness to make your child suffer to do what you think is right for them in the long run. But if we act together, then the cost of acting goes way, way, way down. So what I did by the end of the book was I said, look, I've got 50 different ideas here for what we need to do. But the way we solve this is not a laundry list of suggestions for each family. The way we solve it is by agreeing on a few simple norms that we really can do. And then we reverse the collective action problem because it's a collective action solution. So Pandora listed the 4, just a slight edit, which is that the first one is no smartphone before 14, Because in the US, that's the divide between middle school and high school. You've got to clear this out of early puberty, clear it out of middle school. Of course, here you have secondary school, which goes from age 12 or so to 16. So even though I said 14 is sort of the norm we should aim for, various British parents groups are trying to make the norm be all the way to the end of secondary, which is great. That's much healthier. So I hope you can do it. So anyway, the way I came up with it is this is a way that we can shoot for something. Otherwise, it just keeps getting younger and younger because our kids say, I'm the only one, even if they're not the only one. What they're basically saying is a lot of kids have a smartphone. I need one too. But if we just have a clear floor, no smartphone before 14, we're 16 here in Britain, no social media before 16, phone-free schools, and far more independence and free play in the real world. If we do those four things, we roll back the phone-based childhood, which is what our children have had since about 2012, and we replace it with a play-based childhood, which is what human children need to flourish.
A big reason why children and young teenagers are too vulnerable for smartphones, right, is that their frontal cortex is not at full capacity. How does that affect the way that they engage with and metabolize social media?
Yeah. So puberty is this rewiring of the brain and the body from the child form, which is all about learning. Humans, we're mammals, which means we need to play, we have long attachments, but we're cultural mammals. We have this really long learning period for learning culture. And from time immemorial until fairly recently, we learned culture from older people in our society. Now we learn it from random weirdos on the internet. Our kids are just exposed to millions of little videos. Frontal cortex. So one of the key things about this transition, you go from the child form, which is impulsive, curious, playful, you have to make it to the adult form, which is much more competent, focused, able to do real work in the world. And that requires some areas of the prefrontal cortex, which are the seat of what's called executive function. The ability to make a goal and see what you should be doing, and then figure out how am I going to get to the goal, and then keep your focus on the means in order to, long enough to actually get to the goal. Raise your hand if you have trouble doing this these days, if you have trouble setting long-term goals and sticking to them these days. We're all so distracted, we're all overwhelmed with interruptions from our phones, but we all, older people here, we all have a properly developed prefrontal cortex. We all went through normal human puberty before 2010. If you go through puberty, when the brain is rewiring, and by rewiring I mean you get a lot of loss of nerve cells and dendrites and axons to make room for sort of final connections. So it's not about growth, it's about pruning and tuning and locking down networks that were frequently organized. And so if you go through puberty with these constant interruptions, and the boys are watching porn, and the girls are constantly looking at other girls, and if this is going on for years and years, it just disrupts the development. With executive function and prefrontal cortex, you can resist temptation. But when that's not developed, it's easy to addict you. That's why we don't let kids do addictive things. We say you have to have at least an 18-year-old prefrontal cortex before we'll let you gamble or drink or do various other addictive things.
One of the most shocking statistics in your book is our 2015 survey from the Pew Research that says that 1 in every 4 teens is online almost constantly. By 2022, you write, that had risen to 46%. How does that even make sense? How does that add up that they can be online almost constantly? Right.
So the key thing to think about is that once you transition your social life onto virtual platforms, that's the drama. That's where you're thinking about. And maybe you put your phone down at the beginning of class. You're in math class. You're 14 years old. You're in mathematics class. You might put your phone down or put it in your pocket because you're supposed to. And it seems like you're paying attention, but you're not. You're actually thinking about, it takes them 10 or 15 minutes by the time before they can get away from it. But if you're at a school that allows you to keep your phone in your pocket, you're going to pull it out. You're just going to hide it. And so you might only be looking at your phone for 10 of the 40 minutes, but you're thinking about it for 40 of the 40 minutes. And so if you look at the phone, like the literal phone time, it's not going to be 16 or 18 hours. But yet half of American teens, and Britain is just as bad, half of American teens say they're online almost constantly. In fact, a quarter say they're on either TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube almost all the time, like all day long, TikTok. all day long.
Just toggling from one to the other. One of your arguments was the smartphones are not serving children, and this is something I think a lot of adults find stressing about digital communication too, is that the conversations aren't always synchronous or reciprocal, and it can be hard to resolve things online. There is a mismatch between what a child needs and what this environment offers, you write. How can that lack of reciprocity, I'm even sure that's how you say the word, how does that affect a young person particularly?
One of the arguments that I faced early on was, well, this is just the way kids play. Video games are play, on social media there's playfulness, there's joking, there are memes. This is just what they do. And as I was writing the book, I thought about, is online play really as good? And what I realized is there are a number of really important differences between online activity, which can be playful, and real human play. And one of the most important is that interactions are synchronous, like we're tuned into each other. You smile, I smile. We make eye contact, one of us breaks off, but then we look back. Flirting is like really intense with the specifics of the moments of eye contact. So we have millions of years of evolution for this kind of face-to-face social interaction in small groups, millions of years. And the way that it wires up in kids is they do this millions of times. And so I want the older people in the room, think back on your childhood. Think back on when you were 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, maybe 14, 15, you have a group of friends you hang out with. Think about all the times you laughed with your friends. How many times do you think you shared a laugh with a friend? Millions? I mean, it was just like that was what hanging out is. You're joking, you're teasing, you're fooling around, you're laughing. Now imagine removing 80% of all those laughs. 80% of it goes away. Because, it can be replaced by emojis. You post something, someone posts an emoji, LOL, whatever, So there is an interaction, but it's not what our brains are expecting or preparing for. It's just not satisfying. And that's why, even though Mark Zuckerberg says that he's connecting the world, everybody's connected, Gen Z became super lonely as soon as they became super connected, because these connections are not good enough. They don't supplement our social life, they replace our social life. That's why Gen Z is so lonely. It's the loneliest generation in history, modern history.
The age of consent for social media right now is 13. And you write that 40% of children under the age of 13 have a social media account. So the age of consent clearly isn't working. Why do you think raising it to 16 would be more effective? Wouldn't the same thing happen when...
So right now, so it's not the age of consent. What the US Congress did, the last time it did anything to protect children was 1998, and we didn't know what the internet really was. The US has done nothing whatsoever since 1998, zero legislation or regulation. And in that law, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, originally the question was, at what age can kids sign a contract with a company without their parents' permission? At what age can they give away their data to America Online or something like that without their parents' knowledge or permission? And the original bill said 16. Like, we're not going to make it all the way to 18. At 16, kids should be able to make contract, able to sign up for online stuff. But it got pushed down and lobbied to 13, and enforcement was gutted. In fact, the bill was written so that as long as the company doesn't know you're underage, as long as they don't have positive evidence, they're off the hook. It's only if they know you're under 13 that they can get in trouble. So they try as hard as they can to not know your age. In fact, Facebook used to say, when you sign up for a Facebook account, and what's your birthday? And they would helpfully suggest 13 years ago. That's the default, is you were born 13 years ago. Wink, wink, hint, hint. So the way it now works is as long as you're old enough to lie about your age, you can go anywhere, pornography, anywhere. And what I'm arguing is 13 was insanely too low, and there's no enforcement. So effectively, it's now 7, 8, 9 is really the age. If you can type, you can go to Pornhub. So it's not just we need to raise the age to 16. It's that we need to put the onus on the companies. Parents cannot do this by themselves. Imagine if the company said, well, if you don't want your kid to drink, just don't let them go into a bar. If you don't want them to gamble, don't let them go into a casino. You don't expect the bar, the pub to do this like it's your job. You don't expect the gambling casino, it's your job. That's insane. We can't follow our children around and keep them out of everything. The company that is making money by exploiting our children, they have to have some share in the effort to age-gate the internet. And right now they have no share and no incentive. They really don't want to do it, and we have to make them do it.
How do you see that verification process? Or by what process do you think ages would be verified?
Yeah, so everyone assumes that this means you have to show a driver's license or a passport. And that is one way to age verify. And that's what, haven't we all done this now? Like, to get on the airplane here, I had to show, I had to upload my passport. To do banking, sometimes you have to show your driver's license. So companies have figured out ways of age verification, but guess what? There's dozens of different ways. There's now, there are so many different ways in companies doing this that they have their own trade association. So what I'm envisioning is if you want to set up an account on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, the company, they'll say, when were you born, or how old are you? And then you'll get a menu of, let's say, 5 or 10 different options. And one can be you show your driver's license. Another can be Clear. Clear is this company in airports. If your parents have signed up for Clear, they can give you a Clear account. So, Clear, and it could be checking the iris, or it could be, there's all kinds of other ways to do it, but it could be instant with Clear. There are facial morphography efforts. There are all kinds of different ways. So what I'm envisioning is that the UK government will mandate this. The US is hopeless. We don't have a functioning government, and it's about to get a lot worse. But in the UK, you actually have legislation coming up that's very thoughtful. And Ofcom is working out, how are they going to do this? What I'm hoping they'll do is say, you're responsible for doing it, offer a menu of options, because there are legitimate privacy concerns. I don't want to make people show a driver's license to access much of the internet. I don't want to do that. But at the same time, we have to make some effort to keep kids off of the most horrible sites and to protect them in some ways. So I think it can be done. The industry is brilliant. They can do anything, and they haven't tried because they really don't want to.
Well, it costs money. They don't want
It would cost them customers. They'd lose their youngest customers, all of them.
Do you see it being, we've obviously had the Online Safety Act passed relatively recently. Do you see it becoming a sort of addendum to that?
I can't remember which one it'll be an addendum to, because you have also the Online Harms Bill. So you have the Age Appropriate Design Code. That was several years ago. And that's a great piece of legislation. And as I understand it, you're gradually working on the implementation details. And then there's the Online Harms Bill. I forget which one of them does mandate some kind of age verification for some functions. It's not enough because I think it allows after the fact, after you've signed up. I can't remember all the details, but it's a start. And if some country pushes the companies to do it, within 2 or 3 years, they're going to figure out all kinds of ways to do it.
Talk to us a little bit about discover and defend mode and how you've seen those go out of whack with Gen Z.
So my first book was called The Happiness Hypothesis, Finding Modern Truth in Ancient Wisdom. And I've taught a course for a long time on positive psychology at the University of Virginia and then now at New York University. And thinking about happiness and thinking about why happiness is so heritable. Identical twins tend to be very similar in their happiness level. It's because our brains have a kind of a default setting. And that some people are set over onto discover mode. If you put them in a new situation, they're like, oh, what's this? What are the possibilities? Other people are more in defend mode. If you put them in a new situation, they're like, wait, what's going on? What's the threat? That's just a personality difference. It's always been there. Siblings are not similar on this. One might be one way, one is another way. But a strange thing began to happen in the early 2010s, which is that the students coming onto university campuses, all of a sudden, actually this was more 2014, the college students, all of a sudden, a lot of them were in defend mode. And so if a speaker was going to come that they don't have to see, they would think this is dangerous, this has to be stopped. How about just don't go to the talk? You don't have to go to the talk. But they saw everything was very threatening. And also at the same time, all of our mental health services were filled up. There was no sign of this in 2012, but by 2015, all over America, if there was a counseling center at the university, it had a huge long waiting list. It happened overnight. And so that's what launched me on my previous book, The Coddling of the American Mind. What the hell happened? And we thought it was on the university campuses, but by the end of the book, we realized, no, actually, it's happened to everybody born after, on average, born after 1995. So I started exploring this in The Coddling of the American Mind, and I go much deeper in this book. basically you want students to be in discover mode. I mean, I assume like if you're the sort of person who comes to talks like this, I assume it's because you're curious or because your mother forced you to come and made you get off your iPad. I don't know. But you want yourself and you want your kids to be in discover mode all the time, except when there's a real threat. We evolved for a world in which predators will jump out at any moment and kill you. So that's why we're often sent to a hair trigger. We're very easily afraid. But our modern worlds are very, very safe. And so you want your kids to be in discover mode. That's how they learn. But if they grow up on devices, especially the girls are more open to each other's emotions. The girls take in each other's anxiety. And we end up with a generation, that's the anxious generation.